Here's something else about my perspective on media you might not know about. Rules. I don't like them. I think 9 times out of 10 they are completely reductive and antithetical to the concept of art. Not to mention, it seems to me like people who strongly believe in the concept of rules tend to just enjoy things less on average. And they'll often disguise it behind the guise of having higher standards, but let's be honest. Would you rather have higher standards or enjoy more stuff? Maybe this is just me, but have you ever expressed that you liked something and a friend tried to explain to you that that thing is actually bad because it breaks the rules of storytelling or the rules of character development or the rules of game design? Do you think any human being on Earth has actually been convinced to change their opinion because they were told it broke some rule? I really need to end this side tangent. A common way this comes up for me is the discussion of plot-driven stories versus character-driven stories. I have found that I greatly prefer character-driven stories, but I feel that culturally we're moving more and more towards plot-driven stories. So many times I've been told that a scene that I really like because of how it explores characters is actually bad because it doesn't move the plot forward. And I don't have time in this segment to dive too deeply into that because I spent all my time ranting earlier, so I'm just gonna take a sharp 90-degree turn into the current topic and say heck yeah Omori for being unapologetically character-driven. This game has a plot it establishes up top, but by the end it is not at the forefront of your mind. You will be fully endeavored to witnessing these characters. Nearly every beat of this game in some way informs or comments on the mentalities of its characters, sometimes in the most subtle ways imaginable, and sometimes in the most terrifyingly blunt ways possible. These efforts are such that the game's silent RPG protagonist ends up becoming one of the richest, most fleshed out members of his archetype. All of the investment and intrigue of these characters is largely centered around the game's presentation of mental health issues. I've talked about several games on this show that deal with mental health issues, but have never really called it out before. This is because, for one, I am obviously not an expert on mental health in any way. I am just someone for whom mental health has been relevant for people in my life, which I assume makes up over 90% of the human population at this point. But also, I never talked about mental health for other games because Omori is quite literally the only game that I feel handles its discussion on the subject in a way that I found satisfying. This is just my perspective on the subject, and that is a deeply personal subject for each person, but I found an honesty in Omori that I don't see in other games, at least talking about games that have mental illness as a primary theme. Omori does not shy away from or minimize many struggles associated with depression, anxiety, and the like, for the sake of a more comfortable gaming experience. Yet, it also never weaponized it for the sake of cheap suspense or scares. Not to mention, it's doing all of this with child characters, where you need to be even more careful about how you're presenting ideas. Very few games in general can deliver a gut punch like Omori does. And even among games that can gut punch you like that, none of them earn it the same way Omori does. I think abrupt transitions is just the theme of this segment. I love the colors of this game and just the crayon aesthetic as a whole. It's so well realized throughout the whole experience. I'm shocked at how uncompromised it is. Like, how on earth was this game made in RPG Maker? That sentiment extends to the combat as well. The emotion-based combat system is not the most complex thing in the world, but also it kinda is the most complex thing in the world when compared to other, pardon my language, quirky RPGs. Combat depth really isn't their thing. The moderate amount Omori gives is seriously appreciated. As is the scope of Omori. It's truly shocking given the tools used to create it and the relative inexperience of the developers. The Omori OST is absolutely insane with how many unique battle themes it has to offer. It's exactly the kind of tonal balance you want from this style of game between really weird and genuinely good, usually happening at exactly the same time. If I can be honest for a second, I really didn't think it was possible for another one of these kinds of RPGs to sink its hooks in me. I was really reluctant to turn Omori on for the first time, but it just does every single little thing so well. From art style to music, combat to story, it's all there, and done so much better than it had any right to be. Though, truthfully, the magic is in what I said up top. I want my storytelling to be character first. Omori was on that wavelength with me, willing to give me those heavy air quotes, objectively bad, rule-breaking scenes where the plot stands still so that we can explore these kids. And as a result, they are one of the most emotionally fleshed out RPG crews you will ever find, indie or not.